Hi, I'm Victoria and I'm a life coach and neurolinguistic practitioner. So today, I thought since yesterday we did the whole dealing with um, one's own difficult emotions and becoming present, I thought perhaps a good subsequent video would be to talk to you about dealing with somebody else's difficult emotions, which is challenging and I think somewhat difficult for many, especially if the emotions are out of control or if it's intense anger or intense anxiety. Sort of, how do you cope with that? Um, so I'm going to look. I'm going to do this video and I'm going to give you some practical tips. I am going to say to you that if you are dealing with conflict in your relationships, that you seek conflict counseling, and we are here to help with that, especially whether it's married couples, children and parents, or staff or siblings. I mean, it really doesn't matter what relationship status it is. We can assist with conflict resolution. And I think one of the best techniques, look, there are a number of techniques that one can use, but the best technique that I can give you online to use without a mediator is the technique of curiosity. And that sounds odd. Now, what do I mean by curiosity? So, first of all, let me encourage you to practice a state of presence and self-awareness, because once you've been able to practice a state of presence and self-awareness, you are able to become present and aware of somebody else's behavior. So when we do CRM training, customer relationship management training, and sales training, and we talk about dealing with conflict and helping staff not to become emotionally attached to the aggressiveness of complaining customers, I use an analogy, and here is my analogy. So, if I pick up a rock and I throw the rock at you, are you going to stand there and say, well, let it hit me? Are you going to allow the rock to inflict damage on your body? I don't think so. I think you're going to step out of the way, block it, at least move to protect yourself. Okay? So you will remove yourself from the danger. All right? So that's physical danger. You're not going to allow the rock, you're not going to say, okay, well, throw the rock at me, you can throw as many rocks at me and good, I will just receive them all and they can damage my body anyway. You're intending it to. You're not going to do that. But somehow when it comes to emotional and verbal rock throwing, we have this tendency to receive the verbal abuse or the verbal onslaught, and we have this tendency to think that we should receive it, that we should take it on, that it should be something that is ours. It's not ours. Okay, it's whoever is throwing it out there, it's theirs. All right. And so what I encourage in my CRM training, I'm trying to do this as quickly and shortly as possible, is to teach people to allow the verbal onslaught to stop before it reaches them. Because once it reaches you, you're going to have an emotional reaction. You're going to have your belief system, your filters, your thoughts, and this happens in split seconds. People, it can happen so fast that to become cognizant and aware requires practice and discipline. I say this all the time: practice and discipline. Okay, every single situation, even the little ones, if you practice this, eventually as the bigger ones come by, you will be better and better and better at dealing with this. So your reaction to it, if you take it on, becomes emotive, and defensive, and you feel like you need to state your case, you feel like you need to defend yourself, and at the end of the day what's happening is you have an argument, like a serious argument on your hands, especially if somebody is really angry and really verbally abusive or verbally aggressive. Now, it can also be a passive aggressive emotions. I've had my fair share of dealing with people who are passive aggressive, and it's a little bit more difficult because it's not so active. And so dealing with passive aggression requires a lot of self-discipline not to react to the passive aggressive behavior. But we'll not talk about passive aggression here today. We're just talking about active aggression, active verbal aggression. So somebody comes at you and they're screaming the odds, they're shouting, they're angry for some or other reason, whether you were responsible for whatever it is that they've become angry for or not, it's at this point immaterial. Your responsibility to yourself and to the relationship is to not emotively respond. And how do you do that? It's by being self-aware and observing the person, literally detaching and watching them as if they were not talking to you, but they were talking to somebody else, and allowing them to have their say. All right. Now, your first reaction, number one, is to stop them. Naturally, you want to shut them up, stop them from talking. You want to tell them they're wrong, that that's not the case. You want to defend your point. You want to defend your belief or your stand. And so in this process, you create conflict, because what does the other person want you to do? Each person then becomes only concerned with their point of view and what they want you to know and want you to acknowledge and believe. So yesterday when I spoke about conflict and I spoke about outcomes, often we derail ourselves because we respond in ways that don't get to an outcome. We respond in ways that that defend our stand. So I want you to consider what the outcome is that you want in this whole story of conflict. And if your outcome is peace and consideration and perhaps some compromise, then to respond with your own aggression and anger is not advisable. So the first step is observation. The second bit of advice I want to give you is to become inquiring. So when you don't take on the emotion, you can actually become inquisitive in your approach to dealing with the conflict, to dealing with the anger. So you can start asking questions, but genuine. I mean, you can't do this in a condescending manner. I mean, people, if you're gonna come at your this person with a condescending attitude, in and of itself, 70% of communication is body language. So that in and of itself is going to communicate that this person needs to continue to defend their stand and defend what it is they're arguing about. So you need to be very, very careful. Come from a place of sincerity. And that's why when you're present, you can come from a place of sincerity, because you're not taking on the need to be right, or your ego is not taking on the need to be in control or to dominate. So when you come at the whole conflict situation with questions, you're able to ask questions to find out exactly why they're really angry in the first place. So what set them off, and why would that thing or that instance or that experience actually make them cross? We can, and in the questioning and asking of questions to genuinely understand why they're mad and why they're angry, or why they're sad and depressed, or why they're anxious, you can discover whether there was a misunderstanding. You can discover whether, if there was something that you did that truly hurt their feelings, and you can then start to generate your response from a point of compassion. Now, I know that you're probably also sitting there saying to me, gosh, there are some people I don't want to feel compassion for. Okay, I get that, but at the end of the day, your compassion is not necessarily to tell them that they're right. okay, in their understanding or the reason for their anger. Your compassion is there to facilitate them calming down, so that there can be enough conversation to resolve the situation that is at play at that point in time. And I can tell you that when you come from a place of compassion, the person who is angry genuinely then begins to feel heard, feel valued, feel important. And honestly, most of the time, that fixes it. Most of the time, it fixes it. Now, there are extenuating circumstances and cases where it's not that simple and not that clear cut. And in those cases where I say to you, you need a mediator and you need counseling, because sometimes things have gotten so out of control that it's very hard to backstep or to backtrack on the conflict that has been taking place, because some of the conflict has been going on for years, right? So to backtrack on that is not as simple as just, in the next conflict situation, you're going to become inquiring and compassionate. It's going to require a lot of other work and a lot of other interventions to resolve the conflict between the two parties. And so in the inquiring mind and in the compassion, one generates a feeling in the person who's angry, that they're valued and that they're heard. And honestly, at the end of the day, when somebody who is angry, and this is what we teach in our customer service training and in our sales training, once somebody feels heard, they're more willing to listen to you, and they're more willing to hear you out at the end of the day, because they can calm down sufficiently enough to listen. When you're angry, you're not listening to anybody. All you're listening for is a gap to state your case. We all know that. We all know that. When you're angry and when you're sad or when you're upset, all you're wanting to do is to validate yourself, validate your anger, validate your sadness, validate your emotion, validate why you're feeling that way and why that person is responsible, if you're talking to the person you feel is responsible. So again, recognize that emotion is impermanent in the person who is angry. Recognize that their anger is not who they are. It's just their state in that moment, caused by something that triggered it, and that you can do a lot to avert an argument, and you can do a lot to avert tremendous conflict between the two of you. And this is very particular in teenagers. I want to put a disclaimer in here. If you are a victim of abuse and you are in a relationship where there is abuse, this is probably not going to work. And I do not encourage you to aggravate your aggressor, and I do not encourage you to even try to resolve the conflict without mediation. And I encourage you to reach out for someone to assist you in dealing with what you're facing. Certain decisions need to be made in those circumstances, and depending on what those circumstances are. But if it's general conflict between parent-child, between spouses, between employees, one can certainly resolve them pretty easily with these two techniques. If you need help, we're here to help. As always, as I've said, if your child is dealing with bullying, we're here to help. We can help you with that too. We can help your child face it. We can help your child understand it. We can help your child strengthen enough to be able to cope with bullying, so that no matter whether it's the same bully or bullying later on in life, they are able to cope with it. And bullying doesn't just happen in schools. Bullying happens in the corporate environment. Unfortunately, bullying doesn't stop after a certain age. Bullying continues all through life. I mean, it's actually really sad to see how much bullying goes on in the corporate world. And the techniques that one needs to learn to deal with bullying are pretty simple and not easy, but they are simple, and we can help you with that. So dealing with conflict, I think I'll talk a little bit more in another video about outcomes and how to identify an outcome, and especially if you have time between when you receive the communication from the person who's angry with you that they're angry with you, and when you can respond, you can certainly process this nicely to ensure that you achieve the outcome that you're looking for, as opposed to just fight this whole battle off. There's no need to fight. Honestly, I don't believe in fighting. I don't think there's any need for conflict ever, and I don't think there's any need for a fight ever. And this is somebody that is talking from a background where abuse was part of my story. So yeah, I think that should do it. So remember, compassion and an inquiring mind. Be present. If you can be present for yourself, be present for them, and be genuinely inquisitive about what it is that's really upsetting them, you'll find that most of the time they just want to be heard. They just want to feel like they're valued and that you care about them. And yeah, I think that's it for today. Have a good day. It's raining still in Gauteng. Goodness me, can you believe it? And it looks like it's going to be raining for the rest of the weekend too. So you have a good one and enjoy this weather. Ciao, love and light. God bless.